Hello everyone, this is Zeeebo and welcome to this AFK journey video. So in today's AFK journey video, we're going to talk about Prydwen's early game Waves of Intrigue tier list, which was just updated. So I actually went through this tier list before it got updated on the website itself. Very accurate, by the way. And for today's video, I won't be reviewing all the characters. I'll be talking about why certain characters are at certain tiers, because I think if you have been playing the game for quite a bit, certain characters rating on the AFK stage side as well as the Dream Realm side is pretty self-explanatory, right? So that's why I'm not going to cover each and every one of them. I'm just going to run through who I think are the one that stands out the most, or you guys probably are wondering why is this character on that rank, or why is the character on a specific tier. So without further ado, right, let's go through the TLDR first. So there is a tier list change. So they added Nara and Dandia, and they also changed out a list of characters rating based on season 1 and season 2 skills changes, as well as their pioneer testing server performance. So in today's video, we will be running through Prydwen's tier list for the AFK Stage Push as well as the Dream Realm side. Okay, so I'll be using this pictorial representation one because I think it's a lot easier, especially for the beginners, and I will be able to point out why certain characters are in certain tiers based on the ratings right here. Okay, so let's start with the AFK stage side. So in the S plus tier, we have Arden, Lilime, Odie. Nothing wrong there. Odie still one of the best pushers if he's able to get the insta kill off. Lilime being one of the best unit is definitely S plus. Carolina, Iron, Scalita, yes, S plus. Coco, Smokey, yes. Fresto and Almas needs no explanation as well. So for the S tier, right, we have Floribel as well as Lenya in the damage dealer category being in the S tier. So Floribel is good for the Zoo team, and there are certain there are certain enemy lineups and certain matchups within the AFK stage push where you need the power of Zoo. You need the power of flooding the board with a lot of units. And that's where I think Floribel comes in pretty well. Obviously, Floribel team ain't exactly like the cream of the crop in terms of pushing, but there are certain matchups where you need to use her to pass through. So that's why she's quite strong. And other than just being good in Zoo team in general, Floribel is just good as a damage dealer with the control ability. So it's like a better version of Cecile as you push through the deficit stages. So for Lenya's ability to deal massive single target physical damage as well as the ability to bring down enemies quickly, this character has proven herself to be one of the better PvE pushers in terms of dealing massive physical damage. So similar to Floribel, there are certain enemies where the top damage dealer teams like the magical damage dealers, for example like your Arden, Iron teams, or maybe even your Lilime or even your Odie, they might have some difficulty against certain magic immune enemies, and that's where Lenya comes in and she's able to push through those stages with greater ease. So that's why she's also in the S tier. So I think the reason why she's not higher is probably because she's not like super duper splashable into multiple teams. You kind of need to build a team around her for her to work, and in terms of pushing speed, I think the general mage carries, they're still the stronger ones. So next one, for the S tier, we also have Taylin in the specialist component. So Taylin needs no explanation as well. I think Taylin, when she's good, she's insanely good, but at the same time, she also has a lot of issues facing her. So she's like in this category where if you make her work, she's insanely powerful in the S plus tier, but then there are a lot of situations where she might not work or she has difficulty coming online. So that's why she's S tier. That's pretty much the reason why. With regards to the supports, we have Damien, Hurin, Reyna, and Rowan. Agree. I think in terms of the general tiers or the general ratings of like the supports itself, I think Coco and Smokey as a PvE duo is just so good because they cover both healing and shielding together. Damien and Hurin, they are insanely good as well, but they are both on the heal side. So there are certain stages where I think if you are using the heals itself, you have reduced healing. So that's where they become less efficient. And obviously, in terms of like just general content push, Coco and Smokey offers more offensive power compared to Damien and Hurin duo from the Wildest faction. Even though they do have the Wildest tag, which makes them a lot better when paired with Iron and Arden. But then, right, I think for Coco and Smokey, they're just so splashable. You can splash them into your Wildest team, you can splash them into your Maulers team, splash them into even the Light Bearer team or even the Graveborn teams if you are somebody who mains the Graveborn, and yeah, they're still really good. Okay, so that's for the support side. Rowan, I think Rowan is also pretty similar to Taylin in a sense. If he works, he's insanely powerful, but there are a lot of situations where Rowan's not gonna work, right? So that's why he's not the S plus side. If not, I think I might have actually told Antilla to put Rowan higher, because generally Rowan for AFK deficit pushers is really good. But nowadays, I think there's just a lot of issues with Rowan that sort of lowers his general utility a little bit. Reyna, yeah. Reyna is more of a single target unit. So in AFK stage where there's a lot of strong enemies, that's where he becomes a little bit of I'll say like extra weight, because you swap out one enemy and then you still have 4 other very powerful enemies there. Although there are certain teams where Reyna swapping in, like for example Iron is really good, so there's that. But I do agree with all the ratings here. And then for the tank side, Brutus and Enhendra, yes, very free to play friendly. I just released a video with regards to the best free to play PvE teams. The Mauler core, which is Coco, Smokey as well as Entendra, they're just so good and they're so free to play friendly and they're so splashable that I think they just elevate each other's power level, at least on the AFK stage pushing side. So that's for the S plus tier and S tier. With regards to the A tiers itself, I think, yeah, everybody's, I actually went through this list before it got uploaded, like I mentioned earlier. So everybody's rating, I would say I pretty much agree. Like, I think the reason, okay, for C tier, don't use them. They're just not very good and they're not meant for AFK stage pushing. For B tier, I would say they might find some use in very, very niche situations, but in most cases, they're as good as C tiers. So that's why they're in the B tier. Barrow's case, I think Barrow is arguable in a sense. Barrow has a Zoo team, but outside of the Zoo team, Barrow's pretty much not that good. Although Zoo team is insanely good, so like I do think that Barrow can be somewhere between A tier and B tier, but then B tier is fine because I don't see a lot of people running Barrow in AFK stage in the first place. So there's that. And then for the A tier side, okay, so for the A tier side, I think in general A tier is what I'll say are units where they will work, right, if there's a situation where you can get them to run. But then again, right, whatever they want to do, you have better units at the S tier and S plus tier. So that's why they're in the A tier in a sense. Like, they can definitely work if you don't have all these units on top. You can try to push them. But I think in terms of the speed where you push through the contents, in terms of the difficulty where you conquer the contents, these characters will lose out a bit. So for Mikola, okay, let's talk about the melee units first. So for Mikola, Shakir, as well as okay, Danny's case, not really though. Okay, but anyway, I think, okay, A tier is fine. But okay, for Mikola and Ludovic, let's talk about the supports first. So why are they there? Why are they below Hewin and Damien or Coco and Smokey? Because Mikola is a very melee-centric character. You need a lot of team building to make her work in a PvE stage. And if you are pushing deficit stages, being a melee unit that runs in front, she dies pretty easily. So you are restricted by the team she's gonna excel at, and you're also restricted by the fact that she can die off more easily compared to the standard supports on top. Whereas for Ludovic's case, I think Ludovic is good for the healing compartment, but if you want to compare Ludovic to the other supports up there, the other supports up there have both a heal as well as like a buff or a debuff on the enemy, which increases their overall utility by a lot, which makes it such that, yeah, Ludovic is good for healing massive heals, but then if you don't have the attack buff or the defense buff to survive better or just finish off your enemies faster, that's where like Ludovic loses out a little bit. So that's why I guess Ludovic is A for this reason. For Shakir, Parisa as well as Shakir, Parisa and Nara. Nara, I don't have a lot of experience with her, but then I've seen some comments by a few players talking about Nara's ability to snipe off enemies with the true damage, massive damage potential, where I do agree, but I just think that for Nara's case, provided the deficit is not too big, then that's where you are able to snipe off the enemy. But then again, I think if you build a team around Nara quick sniping, there could be a potential to make her really good for the PvE side. So A tier, I guess is fine because her ultimate damage numbers are nothing to be scoffed at. It's just that I'm not very familiar with her. So I do think that she has a potential for A tier. So there's that. For Parisa and Shakir, both of them are insanely good for AFK stage push, by the way, but I think Parisa is a little bit slower compared to the meta units, and Shakir, very similar problem to Mikola. Like a melee unit usually runs in front, and if they can't really survive too well, they just die off before they get off what they want to do. So that's why Shakir is a notch lower compared to the top tier characters. So for Elsa, Brian, Cecil, Reese, as well as Viperion, yeah, I think for all these characters here, they're either here for either being a little bit too slow, right, or being very team dependent. For example, like Viperion and Bryon. I think Viperion and Bryon, they are pretty team dependent to make them good or make them decent for AFK Stage Push. For Elsa's case, I think yes, you are also pretty team dependent. You pretty much need a CC team. You can't just splash Elsa everywhere. And for Ree's case, I think Ree's damage output in a team that builds around him is really good, but that is also the team building thing. You need to build around Reese, and there are other better units which you build around them, you get better results. So that's why I think they are here. And for Danny and Torrent, okay, so the issue with Torrent used to be definitely S tier and S plus tier. So why is Torrent now in A tier? I think Torrent's rationale being in the A tier is because the team issue. So if you realize by now, a lot of the top units, except for Carolina, they are non-Gravebonds. That's because Wilders as well as Maulers, they're just so insanely good for AFK Stage Push that units with that faction has like this factional bonus, which makes your pushing a lot more efficient. So Torrent is still insanely good for just general pushing. Like if you need a frontliner and you have Torrent the most developed, I think Torrent is still insanely good. But in terms of like, if you want to min-max in terms of pushing speed, right, Torrent definitely loses to the likes of Entendra and Brutus because they have the Mauler faction, so you can build very powerful Mauler pushing teams. And then for Fresto, you can splash Fresto in almost every team for AFK Stage Push. And for Almas is there because of this Iron Ardent combo, like this insta control and then bursting down the enemy. That's why Almas is on top. So Torrent sort of got like moved down because of the other tanks just being better in top tier pushing teams. Whereas for Danny's case, same thing for Torrent. Like even though Danny has the Wilders faction, but Danny just doesn't synergize as well with all the top tier units here compared to the other top tier tanks right here. So that's why Danny's down here. But I think these two units, if you have them developed and you don't have these top tier units right here, you can still use them as a frontliner. I think more importantly will be the core of your team, which is your supports as well as your carry. For the tank, they just need to be tanky enough to hold the fort, to help you survive for your backline to do stuff. So that's for the PvE stage. So I'll be linking the Prydwen's tier list for this one in the description as well as a comment down below, so you guys can visit it. So that's pretty much the review for the generic tier list side. So next one, I'll be talking about Dream Realm. So one thing I want to point out with regards to Dream Realm is these ratings, they are generally based off the Pioneer Testing server as well as pre-charm skills as well as charm abilities, so they are still subjected to change. I also went through this part for them, and generally I think they are quite accurate, right? So I might have missed out some things, but generally very accurate from Prydwen side. So let's talk about the top tier characters, like why they're on top and what has changed maybe from the Song of Strife side, in case you guys are, you know, like wondering why certain units fell off, you know. So first one, we have Mikola. Mikola is S plus across the board. So I'll just talk about Mikola briefly. So Mikola is pretty much smoky but on the melee centric side, and for this season itself there are quite a few artifacts that benefit Mikola a lot more, and there are a few bosses mechanic where Smoky is just not as powerful. Like they disrupt Smoky, so Smoky can't actually channel the aroma to full duration. So I think for this case, Mikola just comes in and performs a lot better compared to Smoky, because now Mikola offers us around the same buff as Smoky, can do decent damage, and pretty much fits into most teams and is good against most bosses. So that's why she's S plus across the board based on Pioneer Testing server side. Okay, so next one we have Taylin. So Taylin is the best damage dealer for Skyclops, Croaker, Necrodragon, as well as Alpha Bear and Crystal Beetle from the Pioneer Testing server, because magical damage dealer side, Taylin is definitely the strongest in terms of single target damage, and these are the bosses where I think the magical damage are a lot stronger, so therefore S plus across this bosses. So for Snow Stomper, she's A because she gets silence, so she can't channel her ultimate full duration, and that's where she loses a lot of damage. For Olsen's case, Olsen has control, which will cancel her ultimate as well, which causes her to lose damage. For Lone Gaze, I think Taylin is S to S plus here, but in terms of Lone Gaze, I think you need more survival, and there are other units with more insane synergy for Lone Gaze, so therefore the level or the tier rating for her is a little bit lower. For Reyna's case, I'll say still S plus and S across the board. So at the start of the Song of Strife, I mean the start of Waves of Intrigue season itself, Reyna as a support is just insanely powerful in the bossing compartment, because Reyna had a pretty shitty seasonal skill, which sort of cause him to lose a lot of power. But this season, because they switched out the season skill, they sort of integrated the season skill into the charm set skill. And in the early game, because you're still not able to get the charm set skill, if you just base off Reyna's base kit itself, Reyna's Dream Realm capability is definitely top notch. Okay, so this is the very reason why I recommended most free-to-play players, in fact everyone, to go for Reyna M+ first, because he will be very good for bossing. Okay, so Lily May is still one of the best damage dealers as well. The reason why she's S for certain bosses is because at the highest level, there are better units doing better damage for these specific bosses. So that's for Lily May. So for Kruger's case, okay, Kruger makes a return in this season because one thing that you guys will realize with regards to this season is there are more artifacts that supports the melee team, and there are more artifacts that benefits the physical team better. So Kruger being a melee unit, being a physical debuffer, is decently good for the start of this new season. Obviously, as we move into the mid game and late game, Kruger's rating might change. So that's that. As usual, the early, mid to late is very different in terms of the Dream Realm side of things, but generally this is a pretty good gauge for Kruger. So the reason why Kruger is not as for Croaker and Crystal Beetle is because Crystal Beetle is magical boss. You need to use magical damage against Crystal Beetle. So physical damage dealer like Kruger is just not as good there, even though he's a good unit for every other boss. And then for Croaker's case, in Croaker's law, I think it's mostly because there's like insta killing, and obviously the better damage dealer being the magical one. So Kruger just ain't gonna fit into those teams as well, so that's why he's A tier here. For Sinbad's case, okay, Sinbad I won't really judge too much, but the positions where he got S+ are the positions where this character fits into the meta teams. But my experience with Sinbad is pretty far in between. So for now, what I'll say is, if we base it off the Pioneer Testing Server meta damage, Sinbad was in the best damage for Lone Gaze as well as Skycorp, so therefore he's in the S+ tier. With regards to the other bosses, I'm not too familiar with how Sinbad interact with them, so I'm not going to talk too much. And then for Torrent's case, Torrent's position in the early game, before he gets the charm set skill, is more of soaking up damage for your allies so that your allies can survive longer. So I think Torrent does a generally good job for that, no matter which season he's in. So very good early game tanker as well. So for Shakir's case, Shakir is pretty similar with Kruger in terms of the ratings itself, because most of the time, if you have Kruger in the team, you're also running Shakir as well as Mikola. So Mikola is just very splashable both in the magical teams as well as the physical team, because the buff that she provides are haste buff, heal as well as attack percentages. For Shakir as well as Kruger, Kruger is more of a physical team centric guy, and Shakir requires quite a delicate team building for him to excel in Dream Realm side. So generally, Kruger and Shakir are pretty similar in terms of the boss usage, and Shakir excels a little bit better when you combine him with Mikola. So that is why Shakir has certain scores which are S+, because that's where you get the top damage teams together with Mikola, because they both run on the front line, and then they both offer the auras for each other and then the auras for the other characters on the front line, which makes your front line damage dealing potential scale off the roof. So that's for Shakir as well as Kruger. Okay, so Lenya is a new addition. So the bosses where Lenya has S+ are pretty much bosses where Lenya's mechanics sort of can deal with the boss, specifically Olsen. So I will save this until the release of Olsen to talk more about why Lenya is good there. But in the early game for Lone Gaze as well as Necro Dragon, Lenya is doing amazing damage, making her one of the best damage dealers, which might even outskill Talin in certain cases. That's why she's S+ here. So based on our initial testing, based on the best artifacts you can put on her, these ratings are accurate. So OD still pretty good in general, right? Smokey still pretty good in general. So I think there are just more bosses where the mechanics are just not as friendly on Smokey. Therefore, Smokey is not as good, for example, for Olsen as well as Crystal Beetle, because Crystal Beetle has a stun, Olsen has a spike which repositions Smokey, which cancels the aroma as well. So that's for the Smokey rating. So Coco in general is still generally very powerful. So this Smokey Coco duo is still really good, by the way, even though Smokey's rating fell off. So let's say if you don't have Mikola built up, but you have Smokey and Coco develop, if you can find a position to keep Smokey's ultimate going, you can still use Smokey for your general Dream Realm runs for good damage. So that's for these two units. So Fresto in general, fell off a little bit at the start of the season because I think HP percentage damage is just a lot better in the late game compared to the early game. So Phrastos' damage output is not as impressive as compared to the Song of Strife. So if this was in the Song of Strife season, Phrastos would definitely be S+ across the board. But right now, yes, I do agree. Although we might need more testing with regards to the best teams to see whether or not there are certain bosses where I think Phrastos can do better. So these are the rating, okay? So Corinne, Tamasia, Cassidy. So these are the... Okay, I think with regards to the remaining units, I'm not gonna focus too much on them because they're not like your general Dreamrealm characters in the first place. So all these non-Dreamrealm characters with all these C and Bs, I'm not gonna comment too much. But for the Light Bearers, okay, so Corinne, Tamasia, Vala as well as Merrily, I think the bosses which they are good at, they are still decently good. The reason why they are no longer in the S+ tier is because they're just better damage dealers on the top, which takes over their positions in the meta team. So if you don't have the top most damage dealers to make your best damage, then you can use these units where you might have them highly invested to secure a decent ranking. So for Merrily's case, Merrily as a true damage dealer, even in the Song of Strife season, wasn't that good in the early game, so that's that. But the Light Bearers, they are still decently good for bossing in general. Just that, yeah, they're obviously not the top, so therefore their general ranking drop a little bit. Ludovic, very niche stuff. Brian, also pretty niche. Yeah, I think that's that. The rest of the other characters, they're not commonly used Dreamrealm characters, so I'm not gonna comment too much on them. So that's the general rankings for the Dreamrealm character side. So those on top with a bunch of red tiers, they are generally the better characters, okay? So in the next few days, I will be releasing Zeeebo's first day Dreamrealm guys and explaining the different team combinations as well as why these teams are the better ones and recommending other options for the lower resource players to secure better damage for your account. Okay, so stay tuned for that. And that's pretty much it for this premium tier list. Do visit the tier list and take a look at it if you want to glance over what are the better characters for you to focus on. But if not, that's it for this video. Thank you very much for tuning in. Do remember to like and subscribe to see more. See you guys again in my next video. Bye guys.